Good morning. Today we're going to talk about what dragon fruit varieties grow the fastest. Now the short answer is going to be, you're looking at it, probably a giant Palora or a Solanacereus megalanthus. Now that's true if you live in the tropics, but to me in Southern California this is not the fastest growing variety. Now I do live in zone 9B, inland San Diego a little bit, up on a hill. And we were down, our low last night was 43 degrees. So in this case, the Solanacereus megalanthus will kind of really slow down its growth and almost go dormant. But it depends on the variety. Columbiana is still really happy here. You can see my other variety I have of Solanacereus megalanthus, yellow Columbiana. And that thing is just dominating. So it's growing really well. Compared to this Palora here, you can see. Now I do grow it in soil, so it's not grafted. I actually found it and bought it this way, which is pretty rare. Is that a nursery of all things? But what I noticed is once we get into the 40s, it kind of will yellow a little bit, see it? And kind of really just go dormant, like a succulent, like an aeonium. Now, in addition, Solanacereus megalanthus, the ants in our area, the Argentine ants, really like to eat the new growth. You can see this is some branches that tried to form last season, and the ants damaged them, and so they aborted. So that was a bummer, but all in all, I would say this variety grows pretty quick in our specific climate, but it would be the fastest growing variety if I lived in a warmer area. So let me go show you some more varieties that grow quickly in my experience. So this is Hana, or Hylocereus monocanthus, and you can see it's a very aggressive grower. This plant is 19 months old. So I got this as one cutting 19 months ago, and look at it now. Really beautiful, darker colored growth. I haven't had the fruit yet, but I'm excited to try it. And I've taken a few cuttings, so I have 3 at the base, and this is the original one. And you can see it's got one new branch of new growth in the middle of December, but this thing is gonna set fruit next season for sure. And you can see I had to move it up the hill. It got damaged from too much sun, so this could not handle about 90% sunlight in Southern California. So I dragged it up the hill, get some shade here from a California pepper tree, and you can see it's very happy. But wow, what a beautiful variety. Hylocereus monocanthus, Hana. So it's a white fleshed fruit, and I got this from Spicy Exotics. And it grows wild along the Hana Highway. I don't know if it must have been imported there a long time ago, but very interesting variety. All right, let me go show you another one that grows really quickly. Now, believe it or not, this is just 4 cuttings that are 7 months old. So Hylocereus guatemalensis, or the Guatemalan varieties, they tend to be really vigorous growers here in our climate. And this one especially. Now this one is similar to American Beauty. We'll let you know more about it after we assess it. But you can see it must have over 24 new branches forming right now. So this is the most aggressive grower in the winter here, or late fall here in Southern California. It's just unbelievable. So something similar to this would be American Beauty, but it does tend to be a bit more sensitive to cold and frost, so be aware of that. But this one is doing great. Let me go show you another one. So here is a slightly different Hylocereus guatemalensis, and I'm hoping this is either G1 or G3. And I've had these 4 cuttings for 9 months. You can see that they're rather large, thick cuttings, and they're just doing great. Now it's not quite as vigorous of a grower as the last one I showed you, and it's a little bit different. The spines are different. But you can see it did get a little bit of sun damage from the heat as well. But it bounces right back. And this one doesn't have quite as much growth as the other one I showed you, but very, very vigorous growers. So at least in my experience, I would say in my specific climate that Hylocereus guatemalensis grows the fastest where I live. I mean, that's just 9 months. So this is Hylocereus undatus, or white flesh dragon fruit, and most are very, very vigorous. You can see here my Thai white grows really, really thick, and this thing is only 15 months old. But wow, that one is probably the fastest grower of the undatus I have. Now this one, I got at Home Depot for $5. It was at the sick table 2 years ago last winter, and you can see it's just a great aggressive grower, and I expect fruit from it next season. Most of these undatus will like less sunlight. They don't like to be in full sun, and they get a bit damaged. And so I like to grow them with a lot of shade in the either morning or afternoon. You can see here David Bowie. That one definitely is a slower grower in my experience. It looks a little bit different. It is a Hylocereus undatus as well, but it just takes its time. It's not as rapid as some of these other ones that we have here. So I'm excited to see this fruit next year. There's been so many white fleshed dragon fruit cuttings that have just been spread out for the past 100 years or so, from the French and Polynesia and everywhere else. So there's a lot of variability on these cuttings. I even have a white fleshed undatus that appears to be self-sterile, so they are not all self-fertile, FYI. All right, let's go talk about hybrids now. There are some very vigorous growing hybrids that I want to share. So this is Purple Haze, one of Paul Thompson's infamous hybrids, and he crossed Rixford, which is a Hylocereus guatemalensis, with Nitzel, which is a Hylocereus undatus, and he got some really beautiful, high-quality fruit from these hybrids, which are very vigorous growers as well. You can see Purple Haze, I want to say is about 18 months or so, maybe 16, but very, very vigorous, lots of winter growth, and it's doing great. Now hopefully you've seen our Dark Star. That thing is a little bit faster than these other ones. That is definitely the fastest, most vigorous grower besides those Guatemalans I showed you. And then also we have Cosmic Charlie here, which is growing really well in our climate too. So Cosmic Charlie, Purple Haze, Dark Star all seem to be very vigorous growers in my climate, my experience. And I know I usually don't like to mix varieties, but I have Cosmic Charlie's father here, which is Nitzel. So I kept them together just to see how they do. And so here's a white flesh variety, Nitzel, growing with Cosmic Charlie. But definitely vigorous growers doing really well. Let me go show you some more hybrids. So here's another vigorous grower in my experience. This is Natural Mystic, and it's actually a Hylocereus polyrhizis crossed with a Hylocereus undatus. So that undatus DNA has really kind of sped up the growth in this variety, in my opinion. You can see it's just doing really, really well. Reaching for the stars. So I would definitely say that this one grows faster than a traditional polyrhizis, with really, really long branches. Hopefully you can see how long they are. So I'd recommend, if you want a fast growing polyrhizis, maybe try this one out, even though it's a hybrid. And you can see why. All right, let me go show you one more. So this is Bruni, Hylocereus stenopterus, crossed with Hylocereus undatus. And you can see, compared to the others, Connie and Kathy, this one grows the fastest, in my opinion. So lots of new branches into the winter. And hopefully you saw earlier that this plant had tons of new growth last spring down here. Now I did take some cuttings and I left a few, but it had shot out like 9 or 10 new flower branches, if I remember correctly. So definitely would say that this deserves to be on the list. I've been impressed with its growth. I've only had it about 14 months, I'd say. This one is harder to find, probably because of its purple flowers. Today I'm going to talk about some of the slower growing dragon fruit varieties in my experience. And you can see here, first on my list is Hylocereus ocamponus, El Grullo. Now, I do need to mention that I live in Southern California, inland, and Zone 9B. And this winter has been rather mild, low in the 40s, and in fact we hit 81 degrees earlier this week. So you can see this branch is still growing, it's got growth, and some of the positive things about ocamponus are that it has exceptional sun and cold tolerance. You can see it produces that nice powdery protection on the new branches, which will fade in time, as you can see on the older branch here, which is the cutting. Now, I got this one about 16 months ago, and it was already 6 feet rooted, and it's just focused its energy on a few branches this season, although they did get quite long. In addition, I really like the fruit, and they say this plant is Hylocereus ocamponus tends to be a great pollinator, so great for cross-pollination. Now you can see it did get a little bit of yellowing here, which is typical, and that will fade and the next spring. Usually will kind of fade out a bit in the winter, but will usually go away all the way in the springtime. Now you can see a couple negative things about this plant. Our first, here's San Lorenzo, and you can see another variety I have of unknown ocamponus, and they all tend to produce new branches at the base of the cutting. It's just what they do. You can see that trait has carried over to Valdivia roja as well. Plenty of new growth at the base of the cutting, not so much at the top. And then even it carried over to Trisha, which is a hybrid of ocamponus. And you can see that trait carried over onto that plant, and that plant even aborted its new branch, which is really surprising once we hit a low of 40 degrees. So that's basically kind of the bummer about this plant, is it's just going to take an extra season or two to produce nice fruit. Now, with that said, you've seen I've gotten lucky with some mature cuttings that produce fruit, but I don't think those are the best examples of the variety. So I think the bricks and the taste and flavor will improve as the plant matures. So let's go talk about Hylocereus polyrhizis. Now, I forgot to mention my Selenocereus cauniflorus crossed with Hylocereus ocamponus did not carry over those traits of new branches at the bottom of the cutting. You can see it does get some of that sun protection, the powdery residue, which is awesome. Sun and cold protection, I should say. And most exciting is that it's actually producing a new branch at the top. So more like a Selenocereus. I find that very interesting. All right, let's go talk about some Hylocereus polyrhizis varieties that grow slow in my experience. Now, there is quite a bit of variability with Hylocereus polyrhizis, but this specific one, Rosa, has been quite a slow grower for me. Now you can see it does get the cold protection and the heat protection, that sun layer, a little sun powdery residue, and then it will turn olive green as it matures. So Rosa is one of the Nicaraguan varieties that grow a bit slower for me, as well as Sabra and Lisa. So here's Sabra. I have Lisa in another part of the yard, but they just seem to take another season or two to really grow and develop into mature plants from cuttings. Now, once the weather cools, they really don't tend to grow too much, in my experience, at least in our climate. So they'll kind of just go more dormant, versus other varieties that still have a lot of new growth right now. Now, let me go show you some that kind of break the rules, some other polyrhizis that don't grow quite as slow as these, and show you how different they look. So, we were talking about variability a bit. You can definitely see that Orejona is a faster grower. It's got some new growth into the winter, and I have not had this plant as long. So very similar traits, but it tends to just grow a bit faster in my experience. And I've had this a lot less of a time than Rosa. I've had those about a year now, maybe 11 months. Now, Red Jaina or Red Hiana is another variety of Hylocereus polyrhizis that grows a bit faster in my experience, but it's much more cold sensitive. You can see it's one of the varieties that will kind of turn purple when it gets cold, while none of the other varieties of polyrhizis we've talked about do that. So you can definitely see that purple coloring. And in addition, you can see last year we got a little bit of cold damage. I don't even think it was 32 degrees. I want to say it was 35 degrees. And that led to some rot. So you can see I had to actually cut it out and use hydrogen peroxide. So definitely quite a bit of variability with Hylocereus polyrhizis. You can see if you can get a nice mature cutting. Here's one of George's unknown polyrhizis varieties. And you can see it's definitely not a slow grower. It's shooting some very large branches into the fall and winter. But again, that was a mature plant with some roots. So three-year-old cutting. So here's another variety that requires a bit of patience, in my opinion. This is Armando, Hylocereus costarricensis. Now, it is really sun and cold tolerant and really thick, but it's just not a very rapid grower for me. Once it gets cold, it doesn't shoot any new growth until the spring when it starts to warm up again. In fact, here, check this out. This is a different Hylocereus costarricensis, and it actually aborts its new growth around 40 to 45 degrees. You can see right there. Versus Country Roads, which is really kind of I would say it grew much faster. I've had it shorter than Armando, and it's nice, thick, and really happy, although it has no new growth at this time either. But Country Roads is growing much faster than Armando. All right, let's go talk about some of the cetaceous varieties now. So let's talk a little bit about Slowest cetaceous DNA. Now, this is Sugar Dragon, which is a hybrid created by Paul Thompson, and you can see it's about 20 months old, and the growth is okay. I'll say it's decent. So not slow, but not fast in my experience. And it's a very unique variety here. Here's a Pink Panther, which is a cetaceous hybrid, and that one has plenty of winter growth and is probably one of the fastest growers with cetaceous DNA in my experience. Compared to this one, here is my Slowest cetaceous that I got from Spicy Exotics over a year ago, and it had great growth. Everywhere I read, it said that it could take a lot of sun, and boy was I wrong. I'm back to square one. This thing was really damaged. I had to cut out some rot. You can see here and here, but it's bouncing back, and it did root really quickly. Now on the other hand, you can see this one is our graft of Sugar Dragon, and it's been over 1 year. It's been actually 13 months now, and this still has not rooted. So I've had a few mature Sugar Dragon cuttings that just are very stubborn to root. So be aware of that. But I've also had younger Sugar Dragon cuttings root almost instantly. So very interesting DNA. Here is a Voodoo Child, which is very similar, if not, some people say it's the same as Sugar Dragon, but we'll see. However, I did notice that Voodoo Child tends to have some growth in the winter, continues to grow, where all of my Sugar Dragon cuttings have basically ceased once we got into the 40s. So there is variability, and obviously these are not pure cetaceous DNA, but in my experience, it's just you need to be a little extra patient with it, maybe an extra season, but in time they will get quite vigorous and become an excellent addition to your garden, especially because they are great pollinators, and they're often, or I think they're almost all, self-fertile. All right, let's go into the greenhouse and wrap this up. Look at that lovely dog, Kiki. Okay, so we're in my unheated greenhouse, and you can see I have a few more slower growing varieties in my experience. Here's another Sugar Dragon. I had this since June. I scored it, applied rooting hormone, and still no roots after 6 months. So I'll be patient with that one, and I expect some roots next season. Okay, so here's a yellow tie. Now, Slowest megalanthus DNA can be a bit of a challenge to start growing, at least to get it to root, but however, once they root, they'll grow quickly. So this one took me about 6 months to root. It really needs that heat in June, July in our climate for them to really root and start growing. Now you can see here, Desert King, I got this in the fall, and so no roots yet. So I just need to be patient. You can see I also have Frankie's Red and Yellow Cross 68. Both of those were slow to root for me, and they didn't root until the weather started to warm up. So unless you have a heated greenhouse, you're gonna have to be a little bit patient with those varieties, in my experience, at least getting them to root. Growth-wise, they should be a bit more rapid. Hopefully next season they'll kind of catch up. Now last but not least, you can see these are two of George's plants. George's Unknown, number 15, and this one's number 3. I think they're a little different. They have some different colors and slightly different traits, but they look overall similar. Maybe some, this very well could be something called Panama, some of the older varieties that were growing in Southern California that I've collected. And George was pretty eclectic and liked some unique varieties. So these ones I have both rooted and no growth this whole season, so in 6 months. So we'll see what happens. I'm gonna just take good care of them and hopefully they'll grow. So there you go. I hope this helps. I wanted to let you know some of my experiences with some of the slower growing varieties of dragon fruit. So give us a like and a subscribe. Have yourself a wonderful day. Thanks for watching.